Welcome to tonight's late night story. Tonight, we follow a city in the clouds, its laws, and a bell that shaped who owned the ground under that sky. Some people know this law as Sky Island. Dawn on the White Sea is quiet. Gauzy light sits on sea cloud. Ropes creak. A ledger opens on a stall. A white beret signs the night watch over to the day crew. Wind clocks tick on a post. From a higher current, a thin stream of milky road curls past and leaves a faint trace of spray. The White Sea is the band of navigable cloud around 7 kilometers above the blue sea. Above it lies the White Sea, around 10 kilometers. Sea cloud is a buoyant cloud that carries boats. Island cloud is a firm cloud that holds streets, fields, and anchors. Verth is soil. It is scarce in the sky. Dials are shells that store energy and release it later. Extol is the sky currency. White berets are the civil force. The god is the executive who heads the shrine and the guard. Upper Yard is a broad stretch of Verth lifted into the sky that sits inside the cloud band like a green table. Angel Island spreads across Island Cloud like a ring. Rope bridges connect its wards. Milky roads thread away in bright lanes. The roads are wind-driven cloud streams. They carry small craft at steady speed when trimmed right. Reef cloud forms at their edges. It looks harmless and drifts like foam, but it can jam a keel or trip a runner on a dock. A reef chart hangs in each ward office with hazards marked by pegs. The city opens with rules. A blue sea ship that reaches the White Sea is a shipfall. A shipfall is inspected, logged, and impounded for a day, while a clerk checks cargo, dials, and crew. A quarantine tent stands near the dock. Oxygen masks hang from hooks. Most visitors do not need them. They are there for those who do. A white beret explains the extol fee and the ban on fire on open docks. The ban is strict. Dry cloud takes a spark fast. God's shrine sits on a rise of island cloud. A low wall wraps a court, an archive, and a hall. The shrine is a bureaucracy, not only a chapel. Petitions travel in bundles. Clerks copy orders twice and stamp both. The shrine sets tribute rates, fishing limits on sky reefs, and ladder rights at Upper Yard's perimeter. Ladder rights decide who may set a ladder onto Verth and for how long. Terms change by season and by policy. The court sits in a side building. Hearings are short. The law reads clear on most topics: theft, assault, dock fires, oath-breaking, and salvage. Salvage law covers shipfalls and drift recovered from milky roads. A finder brings the object, signs a log, and receives a third of value after a waiting period. Owners claim the rest. If no owner appears, the shrine's share funds guard pay, bell maintenance, and storm repair. The economy runs on dials. Breath dials move air. Impact dials release stored force. Tone dials carry voices. Flame dials heat cookpots. Reject dials send back a shock at high cost to the shell and to the user. Households register dangerous shells at an office that tracks storage and sale. Workshops test shells under a canopy with water and sand. Failure logs hang on cork boards. They list maker, batch, fault, and how to avoid repeats. Shell fisheries dot the White Sea. Divers use harness and breath dials to collect young shells from safe beds. They raise them in pens cut from island cloud and feed them with algae mats. A guild tracks breeding lines for strength and storage life. Dials that hold charge too well go to labs. Dials that fail early become training stock. Even broken shells are ground for filler in cloud bricks. Extol mints in small plates that stack. The shrine sets rates for fees and tribute. tribute arrives from island wards and from outfields. Outfields are little islets on Island Cloud where families raise cloud goats, grow sky taro in bins of verth, and net flying fish. Verth is scarce. Its price is high. A handful can buy a ladder right for a season. A sack is a fortune. The city has a custom of ladders. A ladder right is a permit to set a ladder from Island Cloud down to a ledge of verth at Upper Yard. During years when Upper Yard was under shrine control, ladder rights were taxed and sold. During years of conflict, ladder rights became causes. Households kept copies of old permits. Arguments over a single rung could tie a court for a day. After the bell rang, the charter changed these terms. That comes later. For now, know that ladders meant rent, access, and pride. Angel Island's streets are clean and narrow. Rope railings line edges where Island Cloud drops to Sea Cloud. Children go to school in the morning. Lessons cover letters, numbers, dial safety, reef charts, and the oath that bans open flame on docks. At noon, shops sell boiled fish, fried cloud bread, and taro. After dusk, lamps run on flame dials under glass. Tone dials in booths carry calls between wards. A schedule limits use during storm hours to keep circuits open for orders. The white berets keep order. Their coat is light. Their baton is plain. They carry tone dials instead of horns and breath dials instead of drums. The chain of custody is clear. An arrest note follows a person from street to booth to court. Fines are paid in extal or in days of labor. Labor goes to dock repair, reef dragging, bell maintenance, and school cleaning. Records show that most cases end in fines and lectures. Skyfolk dislike jails. They like lists and chores. Navigation in the White Sea looks simple and is not. Milky roads change with wind. A pilot trims rudders and reads foam the way a farmer reads fields. Conch posts line the lanes as markers. Each carries a dial that glows when touched and records the touch in a log for audits. A pilot who drifts into a reef tolls a bell and throws a rope to a post. The rope slows the boat and signals a tow. A tug arrives and issues a ticket if the pilot cut a corner or ignored a flag. Flags are an old system. A green flag on a ward mast means safe wind to the next ward. Yellow means gusts. Red means stay off milky roads and secure boats. A spiral flag means lightning season. Spiral flags hang in months when thunderheads churn along the white sea and drop stray bolts into lower bands. When a spiral is up, crews pull tone dials off outdoor mounts and hang them in grounded stands indoors. God's Shrine runs a registry. The registry lists sky households, their ladder rights, their debts, their fines, and their claims. It also lists Shandian families by clan and by home. The registry is a tool of rule. It shows who is seen and who is not. During occupation years, registry entries marked a person as vassal, citizen, or other. A later charter removed those marks. The archive keeps the old books. Scholars study the edits to see how power talked to itself. The shrine collects tribute by basket. Baskets run on ropes across small gaps and on milky roads across wards. A guard rides the basket and notes weight and seals. A clerk at the shrine counts extol and staple goods and stamps a receipt. Tribute pays for the guard, the reefs, and the bell. When war pressed, tribute also fed divine soldiers and funded edicts against landings on Upper Yard. Records show these lines with sums. Numbers outlast speeches. Trade moves up and down. Skyfolk sell dials, dried fish, cloud bread, and small craft. Blue sea traders pay in gold. in tools, in worth, and in contracts. Contracts matter. A contract says that a captain will return in a season to buy more shells or to trade a set of items. Contracts let a guild plan. A guild that cannot plan becomes a rack of boards and a rope across a door. Schools teach map reading. A white sea map marks milky roads, conch posts, reefs, and safe moorings. A white sea map marks layered winds, thunderhead tracks, and high banks of sea cloud that can flip a boat. Students learn to set a waver, which is a small board with dials that glide on cloud. They learn to push with poles on dry days and to release breath dials in gusts. They learn to clip lines to rings without crossing them. A crossed line becomes a snare in a squall. Public health in a sky city is simple. Hypoxia clinics sit near docks. Staff check blue sea visitors for dizziness, headache, and nausea. Water is filled from condensing frames, boiled with flame dials, and cooled before drinking. Markets keep cooked food under covers during lightning season. Reef draggers clean dead fish after storms to keep rot from blowing through streets. The work is dull. It prevents days when nothing goes right. Household codes are posted. No open flame on docks. No tone dials outdoors during spiral flag weeks. Dials with strong charge stored in grounded boxes. Children taught not to push impact dials in the street. Ladders tied to rings and checked by a neighbor before use. These codes live by witness. A neighbor signs a note that says a ladder was safe at noon. If the ladder fails at dusk and the neighbor lied, the neighbor pays a fine. Upper Yard sits as a green line on the horizon. For years it was under shrine law. For years it was contested by Shandians, who called it home, and by Skyfolk, who called it a gift. Both claims sat in the registry. Meanwhile, families kept fields on Verth ledges with cloud bricks and hand rakes, and marked plots with shells on sticks. Plots shifted when cloud eroded or when a tree sent roots under sold soil. A farmer's map often settled a dispute before a judge's chair did. Cloud infrastructure needs upkeep. Milky roads, thin with age. Crews spray condensed water in lines to thicken them. Island cloud slumps after big storms. Carpenters wedge braces under edges and pin boards through weak patches. Rope anchors rust. Blacksmiths file them clean and dip them in oil. Tone dial lines lose power in long chains. Operators reset them and carry spare shells in a sack with cork separators. Not all rules come from the shrine. Guilds write their own codes. Shell raisers ban buyers who run rough farms and send back weak stock. Rope makers refuse to sell to pilots who cut corners and crash. Waver shops keep a book of names of those who ran lanes in a spiral flag and forced tugs into danger. These lists have force. Reputation is a currency. This city's safety lives in sirens. Sirens are tone dials in fluted horns. They sound for fire, storm, and war. People step to their posts. Dock hands pull covers over flame dials. Reef crews ready nets. White berets clear lanes and open the bell's circle. A quiet room at the shrine answers calls with one-word notes: clear, hold, or close. The words travel along benches and into streets. Some Blue Sea visitors call the office of God a theocracy. In records, it looks like an executive who holds a title, a court, the guard, and the bell key. The office's shape changes with the person who holds it. Some years it behaves like a council chair. Some years it behaves like a king. The registry shows those swings. Tribute lines climb or fall. Ladder rights shift. Guard rosters grow or shrink. Angel Island's year has storm weeks and calm months. Storm weeks bring lightning that eats tone lines and crumbles island cloud. Calm months bring fish runs and the best shell spawning. The shrine posts the calendar at the start of each year. Festivals sit on calm weeks, work sits on both. The city never stops for long. The altitude will not allow it. The law treats Blue Sea arrivals as neighbors under rules. A shipfall crew receives a permit that lists bans and duties. If they want a waiver, they rent one with a bond. If they carry coins, they trade at the shrine for extol at a rate written in chalk by the door. If they carry verth, they declare it. Verth draws a fee and a letter from the ladder office. The letter will matter if they plan to farm a patch on Upper Yard. Angel Island in one day is this: a market that sells shells and bread, a shrine that posts rules and stamps forms, a guard that prefers notes to blows, a dock that keeps fire under glass, a school that teaches chart and code, a court that hears quickly and finds more than it jails, a cloud city that pulls milk-white lanes taut and firms its island edges with pegs and boards. Above, the white sea glows like a second sky. Below, the blue sea sends up a ship once in a while with new words and new tools. That is the frame. The deeper file begins on an island that rang that bell before it ever floated in the sky. Its name was Shandora. Its people called themselves Shandians. Their city stood far below on a forested land named Jaya. Its bell marked treaties and kept time. Its charge was to guard a stone no storm could break. What happened to that city, and how its land rose into the sky, made Skypia into a state that learned to write law on cloud. Before the city in the clouds, there was a city in a forest. Shandora stood on Jaya, a dense island in the blue sea. Its people worked gold into anchors, plates, and bells. Gold was not display, it was civic store and signal. A great bell hung over the city's heart. It called treaties, marked seasons, and brought people to oath. The city kept a charge older than its walls, guard a stone that spoke in an ancient script. That stone was a poneglyph. A poneglyph is an indestructible record that carries a line of history in a script few can read. It cannot be moved without ruin to what surrounds it. The duty to keep it safe is a civic office as much as a sacred one. Contact with the blue sea world came by chance and by need. A captain named Noland reached Jaya during a survey voyage. He found a plague in a Shandian village. His crew felled a grove of trees that carried the sickness. The act saved families and cut a ritual. At first, the grove's fall looked like an insult. Under the bell, a warrior named Kalgara and the captain made peace. They swore to keep faith with visits, with trade, and with a path between shore and city that harmed neither people nor forest. That oath set Shandora into a larger map. The city opened a lane to the sea. It learned blue sea tools for cutting and for curing. It showed visitors its alloys and its fields. It did not show the poneglyph. That duty sat with elders and with a small guard under the bell. The guard wore no special mark. The duty ran by names in a ledger and by a small key that opened a chest with rubbings and notes. The break came without malice. A knock-up stream rose under Jaya. A knock-up stream is a rare surge that throws a column of water and air high into the sky. It lifted a vast block of land, forests and all. The block rose into the white sea and settled there. Shandora's ground became Upper Yard. The bell and the poneglyph rose with it. The city did not. Its walls and most of its people stayed below. A fraction of the Shandians reached the sky on the lifted ground. Others later climbed by other means. A people divided by height learned to move between two worlds. The arrival of Verth in the sky changed two worlds at once. Skyfolk had lived on Island Cloud and Sea Cloud. Soil was a dream. Upper Yard looked like provision. It also looked like proof that the White Sea had a destiny. Households petitioned God's shrine for ladder rights. Patrols formed. The shrine posted edicts about fire and plants on the new ground. Shandians on the ground saw a theft. They had not agreed to any of this. They called Upper Yard home and the Bell theirs. They sent raids up the cloud lanes to reclaim graves and fields. War did not begin as a decree. It began as small fights over ladders and fields. It hardened when patrols met raids and when raids cut ladders. Edicts narrowed rights. Rescue became arrest. The shrine wrote unauthorized landing into its code. Shandian logs wrote return and defense. Two registries faced each other across the same trees. The office of God changed shape in this pressure. In calmer years, the office had looked like a chair above councils and guilds, with festivals and courts as its main work. With Upper Yard at stake, the office absorbed patrol command and set rules for ladder rights, tribute, and reef duties. It wrote taxes called Verth rent, a fee for setting foot on soil within Upper Yard. It promised that rent would fund guard posts and repairs, and that one day a fair division would be written. That promise became policy language without a schedule. A policy of amnesties alternated with edicts. Some years, Shandian households could enter to tend graves if they paid rent and left weapons. Other years, a full ban held. The registry shows how these swings tracked losses on both sides. A bad season for raids led to a hard year. A hard year led to talks. Talks led to a soft year. Soft years saw markets in ladders and in small crops grown under truce and sold quietly back in the city. The pattern repeated. Birka's fall changed the balance. Birka was another sky island. It lay elsewhere in the White Sea. It fell in a single night to a man named Enel, who had learned to use lightning from dials and from an uncommon gift. He left Birka in ruin and arrived at Angel Island with followers and with a plan. That plan was not public at first. It became clear later. Seize the office of God, disarm the White Berets as an independent civil force, and build a power that drew on fear, labor, and a ship that could move where clouds alone could not. Maxim. Maxim was a craft that rose on lightning. To feed its engines, the shrine posted quotas on wood from Upper Yard, on shell farms, and on dials taxed from workshops. The coup followed procedure, then broke it. Enel took the shrine, seized the bell key, and folded the White Berets into a body he called Divine Soldiers. Divine Soldiers were a guard under his direct order. They carried dials with heavy charge and used thunderheads as threat. A surcharge on Extol raised money for edicts and for Maxim. To supply labor, the shrine rewrote levies as work days owed. Policy under Enel sharpened 3 lines: control of ladders, taxation, and rumor. Ladder rights went from permit to ban for Shandians. Verth rent rose. The shrine's notices used the word vassal for households that obeyed and vermin for those that resisted. Rumor carried the rest. A story said that lightning could fall anywhere. A story said that God's power could hear voices across the White Sea. The stories were not all wrong. They were not all right. They made crowds thin near the shrine and made quiet streets tense. Shandian life moved to raids under stricter rules. Crews carried rope, knives, and tarps. They cut ladders at night, took soil by sack to keep ties to ground, and burned flags that marked fields as rent. They also kept quiet laws. No fire near graves, no hunting in spawn seasons, no spoilage of crops not their own unless patrols had salted a field to make a point. Those points happened. Patrols would swing a season from fines to burns. Each burn made another season of hate. Ceasefires happened often. They were practical. Storm weeks forced both sides off Verth and onto Island Cloud. The shrine declared amnesties for anyone who came to market without arms. Shandian crews walked under watch to buy dials, salt, and cloth. Skyfolk walked under watch to buy herbs and tools. Deals passed under benches. Name lists grew in ledger margins. Traders who would not cheat in hard weather. Those names saved lives in later months when fights should have broken out and did not. The bell shaped more than memory during these years. It was an object and an oath. Whoever held it could claim to speak for a line that began in Jaya. The shrine sold its own version of the bell. A small replica hung under the eave. The Shandians called it a lie. They tried to carry the real bell back to a stand inside Upper Yard. Patrols moved it. It moved again. To move a bell of that size is to build crews, ropes, and plans. The plans look like a state's work, even when a state forbids them. Ganfall held the office of God before Enel's arrival. His policy had been conciliatory. He ran amnesties often, cut Verth rent when courts grew crowded, and sent white berets to guide rather than to seize. He also sent letters to clans on both sides, asking for a line they could both accept, a border and a schedule for fields, graves, and hunting. The letters read patient and plain. They did not turn a fight into peace. They did keep some raids from becoming wars. After the coup, Ganfall fell from office and into exile. The shrine under Enel posted new edicts. Some read like administration, shell quotas, reef hours, lightning season drills. Others read like rule by fear, summary shock for trespass, confiscation of dials from households that spoke against the shrine, exile to cloud edges for leaders of sedition. The court did not vanish. It became a stamp. Cases were heard with more speed than sense. Fines rose. Labor terms lengthened. A file shows a person fined for leaving a ladder after a storm because they had fled a bolt strike and chose breath over rules. The Shandian side hardened too. Councils formed under old names and under new ones. A war chief led raids. A healer led care. A keeper of names held a ledger of those lost and of debts owed when peace returned. Children learned to climb and to listen for patrol bells. Songs taught routes and signs for truce. A clan agreed that if a person died on a raid, the person's tools went to the team, not to a single heir. The tools then kept the raid going. The rule felt cold. It kept the clan working when grief came. Between raids, life held to work. People farmed small plots where Island Cloud had drifted against Verth and made shelves with a lip. They planted taro in bins and covered them in storms. They dried fish on racks. They trained children to use breath dials with care and to hand them off when a patrol went by. They kept a scrap of gold, a bit of bell metal, in each house as a pledge that the larger bell would ring again in the right place. Objects carry vow when words must stay quiet. Divine soldiers built posts on Upper Yard. Posts had racks for dials, racks for clubs, and a ledger desk. A chain ran from post to post in view and in sound. Tone dials sat on shelves. Orders travelled by code. 3 tones, wait, then 2 for a ladder cut. 1 long, 1 short for a raid from the west. White berets, now under shrine command, patrolled perimeter lanes and wrote tickets for small trespasses. The distinction between soldier and civil guard blurred. That blurring soured streets. Markets emptied early on spiral flag days. The registry under NL marked households as vassal or other. Vassal status brought lighter fines and access to ladders for harvest days. Other brought labor terms, confiscations, and watch lists. A household could move from one to the other by oath and by paying arrears. The line raised coin for the shrine and broke trust in neighborhoods that had once shared ladders during storms. A neighbor who changed status could keep a ladder and deny it in a squall. That made a wound that would last. Maxime took labor in quiet ways. Wood moved, shells moved. Men and women left posts in shops and stood at scaffolds. A decree said the work was for the city's safety and for a journey to a fair sky. The phrase was not explained. The ship rose above docks only near the end. By then, what it was did not matter to those who had felt the shortages in food, in shells, in sleep. Across these years, a few steady practices held. A truce bell hung in the city for storm weeks. When it rang, raids stopped. Ladders were left in place. Patrols stood down to posts on Island Cloud. Funerals moved without flags. Children received names. Traders swapped lists. These small orders sat like stones in a fast stream. They kept a path under feet when water ran hard. A blue sea line interleaves with this file, a pirate log entry, a trader's note, a rumor in a bar, sky people, ringing bell, land in air, shells that hold fire. These lines reached the world below. They drew visitors. The shrine taxed them and showed them dials. Shandians watched them and did not speak. A few visitors broke rules. They ran lanes in spiral flag weeks. They lit pipes on docks. They cut ladders. Tickets were written. Fights started. Most ended without blood. Some did not. The 4-century break is not only altitude. It is time spent apart while believing that the other side held a promise and refused it. Shandians kept the oath under the bell as a charge to guard a stone and a land. Skyfolk kept a line that said the ground had risen as a gift and a test. Both wrote in ledgers. Both taught children. Both carried a bell, one real, one small and brass, and called it theirs. The end of this period came faster than the start. A fight over the bell drew crews into the same rooms and into the same lines of sight. A reading at a stone changed who could claim to speak for a duty older than both sides. A lightning ship left the sky. A person who had held the bell key wrote one last order that did not match his earlier edicts. The guard split. The white berets took back their posts as a civil force. Divine soldiers folded or fled. Ladders came down, then went back up with permits that read like peace rather than like siege. Those turns belong to the next section: bell, inscription, settlement. For the purpose of this section, the history holds 2 lines straight. A city called Shandora guarded a stone and used a bell to gather its people. A surge of sea threw part of that ground into the sky. A sky city called Skypia grew around the new land, wrote rules for it, and fought with the people who called it home. The fight hardened under a ruler who used lightning and quotas. It softened when the bell rang, where both sides could hear it. Dials turned a cloud plateau into a working state. Shell farmers matched breeding lines to needs. and shops built housings that held shells without crush or leak. Inspectors stamped batch marks, failure boards listed breaks with time and cause, the chalk lines read like a daily newspaper for mechanics, breath dials stalling under overcharge, impact cores cracking in cold, flame vents carboning after long, low fire, reject shells shattering on second use. The boards were not for blame. They were for prevention. Breath dials move air. They drive small boats along milky roads and keep rooms steady in still heat. Workshops test each shell on rigs that measure flow and endurance. A sound shell holds output for a set span. A weak shell spikes and dies. Weak stock returns to farms as training pieces. Impact dials store force and release it when pressed. They power presses, lift, and cutting tables. Flame dials heat kettles and kilns. All sit under glass with sand and water at hand. A registry tracks strong shells so that shop fires, when they happen, are small and contained. Reject dials are rare. They return a surge that breaks tools and hands alike. The guild restricts them to posts that face thunderheads or to last resort kits on patrols. A reject discharge is written like an injury. Date, place, reason, damage to target, harm to user. Those lines go to schools so that warnings arrive as facts, not as sermons. Transport follows the milky roads. Waivers carry one rider, sometimes two. A board, two struts, and low-mounted dials. Riders lean to steer and use breath dials to hold speed in gusts. Cargo moves in shallow boats tied to tugs. Tugs report at conch posts, which carry touch logs. When a boat misses two posts, a tug goes looking. Search begins with last touch, not with rumor. Navigation is learned young. Pilots keep wind charts by month. They mark where roads thin after storms and where reef cloud drifts in sheets. Foam color tells density. White for safe, gray for drag, yellow for static that bites a hand and climbs a line. Pilots handle lines with gloves in yellow banks and wipe dials with damp cloth to bleed charge before docking. Communication holds routes together. Tone dials in booths carry calls ward to ward. Lines ration during storm weeks. The shrine reserves a band for sirens and orders. Clinics have a band for emergencies. A third band is public. Booth rules sit on plaques. Speak plain, state name, give need, end fast. Operators cut calls that wander and place them again when lines clear. The system works best when speech turns simple. Law at street level runs by sequence. A white beret shows a badge, states a concern, hears a reply, writes a note. Notes go to the booth for docketing. Dockets become hearings. Hearings end in fines, labor, or rarely, exile. Exile is short and supervised. Exiles sweep reefs outside ward lines and sleep under watch. Records show that long jails make worse neighbors. Work fixes more than walls do. Amnesties run like weather. On truce weeks with Shandians, the shrine posts safe hours to visit upper yard markets. Notices list what cannot travel. Strong dials, powder, flame tools. Sellers show wares under tarps. Buyers line up. Tickets settle disputes. Names of fair traders pass in ledgers and in talk. When amnesty ends, ladders come up, tarps fold, and patrols return to lanes. Economy rests on extol. The mint is a low room with presses and a year stamp. Temple fees and market rents flow in. Wages and contracts flow out. The shrine sets a small levy on dial sales to fund inspections and boards. Verth rent once ate a large share of income and temper. During those years, shops rose and fell with ladder policies. After rent ended, markets steadied. Charts flatten where peaks once stood. Shipfall salvage fills gaps. When a blue sea hull arrives broken, crews strip mast and beam, save spikes, and sort rope by grade. The court holds an auction on the third day. Skyfolk bid in extol. Blue sea crews bid with tools and with letters that promise return trade. Letters carry weight. A promise to come back in a season with steel and cloth opens lanes that coin cannot. Auctions end with chalk on boards and names on receipts. Little goes to waste. Trade downward is careful. Some dials fail at sea level. Makers stamp a travel mark on shells tested for the blue. A canal in a southern sea buys tone dial stamped so. A desert town buys breath for cool caves. A cold nation buys flame for rescue crews who dig people from snow. Manuals travel with goods. Pages do not tell stories. They give steps and stop lines. Sky reefs feed the city. Fish ride road edges. Nets avoid reef cloud that fouls mesh. Crews carry knives to cut when cloud wraps tight. They bleed fish and hang them in shade to dry. Racks look like low rafters across wards. During lightning season, racks move under roof and flame dials sit cold. One stray bolt can follow a wet rack into a market. After a bad year, each ward paints that lesson on a wall in plain words. Health services handle lack of air, shock, and burns. Clinics keep masks, salts, aloe, and clean cloth. A nurse writes layer, symptom, and time on a slate. Blue sea guests find rest, height by sleep and by appetite. Skyfolk learn to spot the look a guest gets before a fall. Chin lifted to hunt air, hand missing a rail. A guard takes an elbow and guides to a bench. Quiet saves pride. Schools teach safety by touch. Children press an impact shell into a sandbag to feel, give, and return. They pump a breath dial on a rig and watch a vane turn. They crack a flame dial a quarter and cap it under glass. They write what changed. That habit travels to shops. Boards carry failure lines, so a learner reads harm before repeating it with hands. Households bind law. Codes hang by doors. No flame on docks. Dials capped indoors during spiral weeks. Ladders checked by a neighbor. Ropes coiled with 2 half hitches. Children named before the bell in calm months. The code is not soft. It keeps neighbors alive. A person who breaks it pays with work. Work fixes their corner back to right. White berets recruit from schools. Cadets start with maps. They learn booth rules and how to write a line that a judge can read. They walk ladders without looking down and read fear in crowds. They drill with dials but train with voice. Most days they point people to offices, not to cells. Divine soldiers left marks on forms. During those years, arrests ran on edict. Afterward, the guard rewrote papers to slow seizures. One line demands a reason and a witness before taking a person's dials. Another blocks extol grabs without a hearing. These changes sit in ink, not in rumor. Paper keeps power honest longer than talk. Guilds keep craft clean. Shell farmers cull thin stock. Rope makers test splices to failure and post numbers. Waiver shops keep a list of accidents that names causes without scorn. Line crossed, rider leaned late, road thin, reef drift. Names of riders are not on the wall, causes are. The aim is not shame, it is a safer next ride. Storm crews work on cycles. Reef draggers pull cloud mats off lanes with hooks and nets. Road sprayers thicken thin tracks with condensed mist. Bolt watchers read the white sea and strike ground poles on docks to pull charge away from roofs. After a storm, a board shows green ticks for lanes fit to open. Shops watch that board. It tells them when to light lamps and when to wait. Rights sit under law. The shrine holds harvest, names, and remembrance. The bell rings on calendar days and on event days. A small copy hangs in a court on Angel Island. Families gather there to mark vows. Priests write names in a book. The book is city property. A clerk opens it for anyone who asks to see a line. Upper Yard under peace runs by schedule. Ladders receive stamps for farm days. Mix patrols walk perimeter trails and note tree fall and soil slip. A field office holds maps of plots with shells on sticks that match numbers on files. Disputes go to a bench where a white beret sits with a clan elder and a ward clerk. Most end with a new line on a map and a grip. That result reads cold. It prevents a next fight. Blue Sea visits settle into lanes. Traders who return on time keep a circle of partners. A clerk posts a list of reliable names by the dock. Visitors read it and choose. The city wants quiet, not crowds. Rules under glass set terms. No fire, no powder. Dials declared, fees posted. No hunting on Upper Yard, no cutting ladders, obey flags. A person who keeps to them meets only silence at offices and a bowl of boiled fish served on time. Insurance exists in small pools. Households pay extol into ward funds. Funds cover storm repairs, lost nets, and funerals for workers who fall. Claims are read aloud at ward meetings. A neighbor speaks to facts. A clerk writes the grant. The method keeps pity from turning to favor. Numbers decide after names are heard. Apprenticeships carry exams with parts that matter. Splice 3 lines to a set pull. Sort shells by charge in a minute with a glove. Draw a lane from 4 conch posts and a reef. Certificates hang in shops. A shop with 3 certificates draws work even in thin months. Festivals fit weather. Bell Day marks the first great ring heard in living memory. It is observed with simple food and a walk to the replica at dusk. Reef Day follows storm weeks, when crews who kept lanes open eat in the square. Children sweep milky road ramps and earn a small coin stamped with a bell. Names for the seasons lost are read. A tone dial plays the low note for end of shift. People go home without speeches. Risk culture ends days the same way. A ward captain checks ladder caps. A clerk posts fines paid and fines due. A shopkeeper caps a flame dial under glass. A white beret walks a last round past conch posts and marks each with a thumb so the ledger shows the touch. Wind clocks tick. Tone lines rest. The milky roads carry a single tug pulling an empty boat back to the shed. This is living on clouds as a record. Shells bred and tested, roads kept and measured, laws printed and posted, fines counted and paid, ladders stamped and checked, bells rung on schedule, and work shared across lines that only matter if people forget why the ladders were there at all. The ladders were there to join a sky city to a piece of ground that rose one day and did not fall. The ground carried a duty. The sky learned to share it. The sharing took centuries. The habit holds now by choice. The bell did not begin as a symbol in the sky. It was a city's tool. In Shandora, it called treaties and seasons. In Skypiea, the day it rang across the White Sea and down to Jaya, it returned to the same job. Ward logs mark the hour. A Blue Sea journal on Jaya marks the same minute. The line between books meets without talk. The ring did several jobs at once. It declared custody after years when patrols moved the bell like loot. It served as a beacon to families chasing a rumor through generations. It closed a circle that had begun with separation and seizures. It also signaled a change at the shrine. A notice went up. Amnesty on Upper Yard until sunset. Ladders at will for graves and water, no sums, no questions. The inscription came to light in the same window. The poneglyph near the bell received a reading. Minutes record participants, weather, and the words written into the archive afterward. The line that mattered most to scholars did not concern rule. It named a weapon from a lost age and pointed toward where its counterpart might be found. The minutes do not argue the point. They place it beside date and bell. A second message sat on the bell itself. Gold plates carried a line carved by a blue sea traveler years before. His crew had reached the sky by a route with few traces besides this mark. The line tied sea and sky with metal rather than rumor. For archivists, it answered how a tale about the bell had moved below, without the bell. For citizens, it showed that the bell could carry a message farther than sight. Enel's rule ended at the pace that the bell returned. The lightning ship Maxime lifted and left. The divine soldier's command split. The white berets stacked edict batons by a wall and resumed civil work. The shrine opened its doors. There was no address, there were forms, a rescission of the Verth ban, a halt to confiscations of strong dials, a suspension of tribunal surcharges, the quiet fit a city done with noise. Ganfall resumed work without pomp. He sat plainly with ward captains and clan elders and opened a ledger. 3 lines on the first page set the course. End Verth rent, restore ladder rights, write a settlement. The phrase, write a settlement, became the work of 2 months. The charter that followed set 3 classes of land: graves, farms, and common. Graves returned to Shandian care without fee. Farms stayed with whoever had worked them that season, sky or ground, for the span of the crop. Common land, paths, streams, game forest, belonged to both, ruled by season, tool, and fire limits. Seizure by surprise was banned. Any shift in plot required a mark on a posted map and a witness at the field office. Ladder rights moved from purchase to registry. A person who wanted to set a ladder named a plot, a day, and a purpose. A clerk stamped the card and copied it to the field office. A Shandian elder or a ward captain countersigned. The countersign kept the paper from turning into a one-sided permit. It trained neighbors to read maps together at the start, not to argue at dusk. The court rebuilt its docket. Trespass during amnesty weeks vanished. Cases that smelled of old edicts were dismissed. Fines from the lightning years were audited. Confiscated dials went home, if no danger remained. A clerk wrote a word on a chalkboard to explain. Replevin, taken goods return when taking lacked standing. The term had no sky route. It worked. The shrine narrowed on purpose. Rituals and registry stayed. Direct command over the guard ended. The white berets answered to a civilian chair chosen by ward captains and confirmed at the shrine. The divine soldiers dissolved. A few stayed as guards under new terms. Others left for far docks. Titles shrank. Offices remained. The bell received an office of its own. A key hung on a peg. A book listed rings by date and cause. Harvest, remembrance, treaty, storm warning, charter day. The bell did not ring for visitors. It rang for the city. A quiet rule held. No ring without a line in the book first. The charter named a joint patrol. Mixed teams of Shandian trackers and white berets walked perimeter trails and riverbanks. They marked landslips, route flare, and new burrows. They pulled down old flags and set posts with shells that matched numbers on a map. Reports went to both sides. Dull reports meant the war had ended in practice. A dial guild formed from shops that had kept doors open through the lightning years. Makers pooled failure logs. Farmers standardized charge marks. A small bench tested shells at simulated sea-level pressure so exports would not crack. The guild posted a pledge: no reject shell without registry, no tone shell on clinic bands sold to homes, no flame shell without glass and sand. Buyers learned to ask for the pledge by name. Blue Sea visitation moved from ad hoc to normal. Ward offices issued visitor cards with maps and hour bands. The card showed where walking alone was allowed and where a guide was needed. It listed bans on fire and powder. It matched fees to services. It named penalties as lines, not threats. A visitor who kept to it left behind coin and few stories. Memory did not fade. It changed rooms. A wall near the replica bell listed names by clan and ward. People laid shells, not flowers. A new festival sat in a calm month, a day when families from Angel Island and Upper Yard set long tables on common ground and ate fish, bread, and taro. Flags were banned. Children ran. No speeches. The shrine archive reopened with a new catalogue. Old edicts kept red bands on their spines. New charters wore blue. A student could see the turn in colour at a glance. Tables held rubbings from the poneglyph and copies of the bell inscription. Notes nearby stuck to dates and weather and who stood where. The archive served record, not theory. Trade lines felt reform as numbers. With rent ended and amnesties regular, small farms sent surplus to markets. Root prices steadied. Shell farms regained workers. The guild shipped travel-marked tone dials after 2 seasons of tests. Letters came back with neat praise and precise complaint. A dusk drift in tone. A flame shell that held steady in damp. Shops pinned letters to walls and tuned batches. Justice thinned as spectacle and thickened as practice. The court posted a single-page docket. Hearings began on time and ended with clear orders. A separate bench handled claims from the lightning years. Refunds paid out with interest noted on a board. The slow, visible payback lowered room heat faster than a speech. Ganfall stepped back on schedule. Ward captains and clan elders set calendars. A small council met each week. 1 elder, 1 captain, 1 clerk, 1 priest, 1 maker. They signed a page and rotated chairs. Rotation kept offices from swelling into persons. The bell's line of sight to Jaya became a lesson. A drawing in schools showed the angle across cloud and air. Children traced the path with string between 2 pins, Angel Island and Jaya. The exercise turned a tale into a fact about sound and wind. Teachers wrote the hour and the echo in chalk. Upper Yard's map thickened with shared signs. Fields carried paired names. Paths bore both words. New trees planted at plot edges were marked with shells cast from brass, taken from old replicas. The replicas were not thrown away. They were melted and used as markers. Old claims turned into borders both sides could touch without anger. Some people from the lightning years faced hearings, not for belief, for acts, seizure without cause, harm under colour of office, theft of dials. Penalties included reef labour and fines that funded the archive and clinic. A few left rather than stand before a bench. Their names sit in a ledger with a note, gone. The city did not build a wall of shame. It built roads and kept moving. The charter is short. It fits on a leaf. It is read aloud on Charter Day each year. The words cover land, ladders, law, silence at rites, the bell, and the book that records its rings. The last line says, either side may call for review in a calm month, not during storms, That line spared the island more than once when wind rose. The budget changed. Worth rent vanished. Tribute from wards stabilized. Exports of marked dials grew. The shrine built a roof over the shipfall dock, so weather would not decide a case by knocking a person dizzy before a hearing. Clinics gained a room for Blue Sea guests. The bell office received 2 coils of new rope, a pad for the stand, and oil for the axle. One more bench formed in the quiet. Farmers brought odd shells. Makers brought failed housings. Clerks brought letters from Blue Sea buyers. Trials were simple, and notes plain. If a tone dial drifted at dusk, they checked moisture and sent a fix in one sentence. If a breath dial shoved children off small waivers, they bored a smaller nozzle and posted a pattern any shop could copy. No seal of office sat over this bench. Results did. The Shandian archive opened to skyfolk on set days. Ledgers of clans, maps of trails, and rubbings of names lay on tables. A rule banned blame in that room. A person could point, ask a date, learn a path, and leave. Outside, talk resumed. Inside, record ruled. Travel between sea and sky grew calmer. A schedule at the dock showed days when currents favored arrivals. Blue Sea captains learned to lash tone dials to masts and to cap flame in cabins. Sky pilots learned the hand signs of sea crews. The measure of success was modest. Fewer tickets, fewer lines under confiscated for safety. Reports from the year repeat a phrase, no glory, clean days. The glory had been noise that bent meals. Clean days are hours, without shock, when tools return to hooks and forms to drawers. A sky city cannot choose weather. It can choose habits. After the ring and the reading, habits matched need. The last entry in the settlement file is a receipt. It lists 2 coils of rope, a pad for the bell stand, and oil for the axle. The note says, for long ring in calm air. The book closes on that line. It is not legend. It is an order fulfilled. After the bell rang on Upper Yard, the city wrote its future in small tools. Dials moved first. Shell guilds printed manuals. They set naming rules, handling steps and warnings. Breath dials received vents. Impact dials received caps. Tone dials received storm covers. Flame dials gained glass sleeves for docks. Reject dials kept a red band and a ledger that paired each sail with a lesson. Traders carried those manuals to Blue Sea ports. At first, the shells were curios. Then they became parts. A shipwright fixed a winch with a breath dial. A carpenter drove pegs with a small impact dial. Fishers cooled holes with tone dials that hummed at a low pitch and kept air moving. An island customs office wrote the first rule. Treat shells like tools, not like charms. Exports brought coin and contracts. The shrine set quotas to protect shell beds. A clerk issued seals that matched shells to lots and lots to boats. A tallyman at a Blue Sea harbour checked those seals and wrote back when batches failed early. Failure letters changed farm practice in the sky. Shell raisers split lines, kept longer notes on feed, and culled poor stock sooner. A cycle formed. The sea below paid. The city above adjusted. Safety standards followed trade. The guild issued stamps. A stamp on a plate meant a dial could be used near cloth, near children, or near dock fuel. A second stamp meant the shell had survived drops from a posted height. A third meant the shell stored less charge than a limit that had injured hands in past seasons. These marks turned live objects into fair stock. Shops learned to ask for stamps as if they were food dates. Tools changed work on both sides. In the sky, small waivers gained better steering. In the Blue Sea, kitchens took to flame dials as travel stoves. Clinics used breath dials to keep rooms fresh on hot days. A bell founder ordered a tone dial to test the ring of bronze before a pour. He wrote back that it saved coal. That line sits in a file that shows how a skycraft settled into docks and markets without fanfare. Memory settled into order, not into speeches. Skypiea wrote a bell day into its calendar. Bell day is simple. People gather at the circle, read the treaty lines, and ring a small bell once for the living and once for the dead. The big bell rings when wind is right. A clerk records the time. Children carry ladders as a game around the circle and hand them off without dropping a rung. The act reminds them that ladders once decided law. The Shandian side opened its archive. Ledgers from Jaya showed treaties, harvests, and the list of names of those sworn to guard the stone. Rubbings of the bell's old inscriptions sat under glass, with dates on their backs. A copy room made thin books for schools. The books stayed calm. They taught that guarding a record is a civic task. It stays steady when rulers change. That idea changed how some in the city spoke about power. The shrine's archive kept its own record. It showed years of vassal and other, then a charter that struck those words out. The page carried a small note in the margin, replaced by citizen. The change did not erase rows of harm. It set the next pages on a cleaner line. Teachers used the two pages side by side. They said what each word had done. They did not call one people pure and the other wicked. They named rules and effects. The settlement charter still needed care. Land on Upper Yard was finite. Fields had to be mapped and shared without letting old fear creep in by other names. A joint survey set stones and shells to mark lines. Mixed patrols walked borders. A ladder right became a farming right with a season, a plot, and a duty to mend paths. When a tree fell and put a plot into shadow, neighbors traded hours rather than edicts. These acts closed gaps left by war. The White Berets returned to civil mandate. They kept tone dials and batons. They left lightnings to stories. Divine soldiers vanished into fields and shops. Some stood before judges and accepted fines for acts done under edicts. The court did not run show trials. It posted cases as brief lines: date, act, fine, labor. A long wall of small text can tire eyes. It also keeps rage from swelling into a new round. Trade with the Blue Sea gained a human shape. Crews came with contracts and left with shells, bread, and school stories. Some stayed a season to learn dial care. A guild sent 2 masters down to teach safety. Their notes say the air near sea level felt heavy, the fish tasted light, and markets liked clear labels. Later, labels on sky goods used simple icons. Spark crossed out for docks, cradle for nursery, leaf for safe near food. A museum of shipfalls opened near the quay. Finds included fragments of hulls, broken rudders, and small effects that had no owners. A corner showed fakes, shells cut and filled with wire, plates stamped without guild marks, and a sign that said how to spot both. Visitors read cards that listed storms, dates, and routes. Children traced a path from a Blue Sea island to a post on the White Sea. Lines teach better than boasts. Reinterpretation of Chandara changed speech outside the sky. Before, some called its guardians rebels against an order that lay above their ken. After, more saw them as stewards of a record that did not belong to any crown. The poneglyph stayed where it stood. A reading was logged as an archival event, not as a spectacle. A law took shape in schools. Some words are not goods, some duties do not sell. Scholars wrote thin appendices about Birka. They sketched a past where some skyfolk left a different island, and where that island once knew a craft that called down lightning. They noted that conjectures about the moon and about older flights sit beyond the charter's scope. The words interesting and unproven appear in that file. The words keep a field from turning into rumor. Dials spread farther. A Blue Sea Navy bought breath sets to vent holes and cut rot in humid bays. A lighthouse keeper stored a tone dial with a pulse that struck every hour and kept shifts honest. A small town fixed a water wheel with a flame dial under a copper pot, and the pot boiled steady even when wind dropped. The town wrote thanks to a guild. The guild pinned the letter next to a failure notice. The two papers showed what trade should feel like. Extol did not become a sea coin. It stayed in the sky. Blue Sea coins bought shells and bread. Extol paid tax and rent. Shops hung 2 price boards. A clerk at the shrine posted exchange rates in chalk. The chalk changed by wind and by market, not by decree. A calm office and a wet rag kept those numbers from turning into fights. The bell in the circle kept working as a tool. It rang at noon on clear days to time reef crews. It rang at festivals to bring people in. It rang when a storm damaged milky roads and crews had to thicken lanes with spray. A bell can be a symbol. In this town, it is also a clock. Memory did not curdle into a cult. The treaty oath under the bell remained an act, not a banner. Families mixed at markets and at schools. A harvest fair on Upper Yard paired soil from Shandian fields with cloud bricks from Angel Island in one stall, sold taro soup, and taught how to tie a ladder rope blindfolded. A bench near the circle held a small brass bell for children to ring once each year. Cloudcraft matured. Sprayers for milky roads received better nozzles that used less water. Island cloud braces shifted from rope to rod at edges that sagged. Conch posts gained log dials that kept their own touch lists even when a clerk forgot to write. Failure charts shrank. Tugs ran fewer tickets. The city felt less brittle each storm week. Quiet changes reached homes. Flame dials found safe shelves with cork pads under glass. Tone dials moved to hooks that sat on grounded bolts and came inside during spiral flags. Household codes gained one new line. Children teach the code back to adults once a year. A signed page by a child shows a rule living. The settlement charter included graves. Stones at Upper Yard received shared care. Patrols passed and tipped hats. No one counted hats. They counted clean paths and trimmed grass. A city commits by brooms more than by words. A Blue Sea clerk wrote a note after a visit. Skypiea runs like a port with no tide. The note meant that clocks and lists, not waves, set the day. The clerk bought 3 tone dials and a book. The book held reef charts and the story of the bell, printed in small type with terms in the margin. He took both home. Months later, a school in his town added a lesson on cloud law to a unit on harbors. A small court at the shrine stayed busy with ordinary things. A pilot cut a corner. A market stall weighed light. A ladder owner failed to tie a ring and paid to mend a wrist. These cases never left the cloud band. They mattered more than old thunder in keeping peace. Laws about value from Ilblue whispered into shops. A sign under glass said, "Say what the thing means. Ask what it means to the other. Write the promise." Disputes shrank. Restitution appeared as labor, repair, or a story told in public at a set hour. The court took notes. The notes read like recipes for calm. The Shandian council guarded the stone with the same rhythm as before. A register of keepers hung on a wall in a cool room. The page carried a spare line. Duty continues. No more was needed. The bell's ring reached that room on still days. It did not shake hands. It steadied them. Skyfolk kept a small practice for blue sea arrivals. A visitor who stayed a week learned to set a ladder, to thicken a milky road, and to ground a tone dial. A stamped card proved it. The card looked simple. It made neighbors less tense when storms hit. Risk did not leave. Thunder still ran in seasons. Reefs still drifted. A milky road still thinned when workers were sick. But systems hung together. A siren sounded. People stepped to posts. Tugs moved. Lanes thickened. Clinics set cots. The bell in the circle rang once, and then again when the work was done. Far below, the island of Jaya kept its forests. A post on its shore recorded the days when the bell's note hung in the wind from above. Once a year, a clerk there wrote that the sky had spoken. He noted the hour and the wind. He closed his book. A line from a sky city met a line from a sea town without a ship between them. The bell is not an ending. It is a working tool, kept clean, tested, and used often together. At evening in Angel Island, ledgers close. A white beret signs the day watch over tonight. Wind clocks tick on a post. A clerk puts chalk back in a box and wipes the board. A small bell under the eave rings once. Over the white sea, the big bell keeps its note between reefs and roads. It is not loud. It is enough to mark time in a city that learned, at last, to ring together. In the Blue Sea, kitchens took to flame dials as travel stoves. Clinics used breath dials to keep rooms fresh on hot days. A bell founder ordered a tone dial to test the ring of bronze before a pour. He wrote back that it saved coal. That line sits in a file that shows how a skycraft settled into docks and markets without fanfare. Memory settled into order, not into speeches. Skypiea wrote a bell day into its calendar. Bell Day is simple. People gather at the circle, read the treaty lines, and ring a small bell once for the living and once for the dead. The big bell rings when wind is right. A clerk records the time. Children carry ladders as a game around the circle and hand them off without dropping a rung. The act reminds them that ladders once decided law. The Shandian side opened its archive. Ledgers from Jaya showed treaties, harvests, and the list of names of those sworn to guard the stone. Rubbings of the bell's old inscriptions sat under glass, with dates on their backs. A copy room made thin books for schools. The books stayed calm. They taught that guarding a record is a civic task. It stays steady when rulers change. That idea changed how some in the city spoke about power. The shrine's archive kept its own record. It showed years of vassal and other, then a charter that struck those words out. The page carried a small note in the margin, replaced by citizen. The change did not erase rows of harm. It set the next pages on a cleaner line. Teachers used the 2 pages side by side. They said what each word had done. They did not call one people pure and the other wicked. They named rules and effects. The settlement charter still needed care. Land on Upper Yard was finite. Fields had to be mapped and shared without letting old fear creep in by other names. A joint survey set stones and shells to mark lines. Mixed patrols walked borders. A ladder right became a farming right with a season, a plot, and a duty to mend paths. When a tree fell and put a plot into shadow, neighbors traded hours rather than edicts. These acts closed gaps left by war. The White Berets returned to civil mandate. They kept tone dials and batons. They left lightnings to stories. Divine soldiers vanished into fields and shops. Some stood before judges and accepted fines for acts done under edicts. The court did not run show trials. It posted cases as brief lines: date, act, fine, labor. A long wall of small text can tire eyes. It also keeps rage from swelling into a new round. Trade with the Blue Sea gained a human shape. Crews came with contracts and left with shells, bread, and school stories. Some stayed a season to learn dial care. A guild sent 2 masters down to teach safety. Their notes say the air near sea level felt heavy, the fish tasted light, and markets liked clear labels. Later, labels on sky goods used simple icons. Spark crossed out for docks, cradle for nursery, leaf for safe near food. A museum of shipfalls opened near the quay. Finds included fragments of hulls, broken rudders, and small effects that had no owners. A corner showed fakes, shells cut and filled with wire, plates stamped without guild marks, and a sign that said how to spot both. Visitors read cards that listed storms, dates, and routes. Children traced a path from a Blue Sea island to a post on the White Sea. Lines teach better than boasts. Reinterpretation of Chandara changed speech outside the sky. Before, some called its guardians rebels against an order that lay above their ken. After, more saw them as stewards of a record that did not belong to any crown. The poneglyph stayed where it stood. A reading was logged as an archival event, not as a spectacle. A law took shape in schools. Some words are not goods, some duties do not sell. Scholars wrote thin appendices about Birka. They sketched a past where some skyfolk left a different island, and where that island once knew a craft that called down lightning. They noted that conjectures about the moon and about older flights sit beyond the charter's scope. The words interesting and unproven appear in that file. The words keep a field from turning into rumor. Dials spread farther. A Blue Sea Navy bought breath sets to vent holes and cut rot in humid bays. A lighthouse keeper stored a tone dial with a pulse that struck every hour and kept shifts honest. A small town fixed a water wheel with a flame dial under a copper pot, and the pot boiled steady even when wind dropped. The town wrote thanks to a guild. The guild pinned the letter next to a failure notice. The two papers showed what trade should feel like. Extol did not become a sea coin. It stayed in the sky. Blue Sea coins bought shells and bread. Extol paid tax and rent. Shops hung 2 price boards. A clerk at the shrine posted exchange rates in chalk. The chalk changed by wind and by market, not by decree. A calm office and a wet rag kept those numbers from turning into fights. The bell in the circle kept working as a tool. It rang at noon on clear days to time reef crews. It rang at festivals to bring people in. It rang when a storm damaged milky roads and crews had to thicken lanes with spray. A bell can be a symbol. In this town, it is also a clock. Memory did not curdle into a cult. The treaty oath under the bell remained an act, not a banner. Families mixed at markets and at schools. A harvest fair on Upper Yard paired soil from Shandian fields with cloud bricks from Angel Island in one stall, sold taro soup, and taught how to tie a ladder rope blindfolded. A bench near the circle held a small brass bell for children to ring once each year. Cloudcraft matured. Sprayers for milky roads received better nozzles that used less water. Island cloud braces shifted from rope to rod at edges that sagged. Conch posts gained log dials that kept their own touch lists even when a clerk forgot to write. Failure charts shrank. Tugs ran fewer tickets. The city felt less brittle each storm week. Quiet changes reached homes. Flame dials found safe shelves with cork pads under glass. Tone dials moved to hooks that sat on grounded bolts and came inside during spiral flags. Household codes gained one new line. Children teach the code back to adults once a year. A signed page by a child shows a rule living. The settlement charter included graves. Stones at Upper Yard received shared care. Patrols passed and tipped hats. No one counted hats. They counted clean paths and trimmed grass. A city commits by brooms more than by words. A Blue Sea clerk wrote a note after a visit. Skypiea runs like a port with no tide. The note meant that clocks and lists, not waves, set the day. The clerk bought 3 tone dials and a book. The book held reef charts and the story of the bell, printed in small type with terms in the margin. He took both home. Months later, a school in his town added a lesson on cloud law to a unit on harbors. A small court at the shrine stayed busy with ordinary things. A pilot cut a corner. A market stall weighed light. A ladder owner failed to tie a ring and paid to mend a wrist. These cases never left the cloud band. They mattered more than old thunder in keeping peace. Laws about value from Ilblue whispered into shops. A sign under glass said, "Say what the thing means. Ask what it means to the other. Write the promise." Disputes shrank. Restitution appeared as labor, repair, or a story told in public at a set hour. The court took notes. The notes read like recipes for calm. The Shandian Council guarded the stone with the same rhythm as before. A register of keepers hung on a wall in a cool room. The page carried a spare line. Duty continues. No more was needed. The bell's ring reached that room on still days. It did not shake hands. It steadied them. Skyfolk kept a small practice for blue sea arrivals. A visitor who stayed a week learned to set a ladder, to thicken a milky road, and to ground a tone dial. A stamped card proved it. The card looked simple. It made neighbors less tense when storms hit. Risk did not leave. Thunder still ran in seasons. Reefs still drifted. A milky road still thinned when workers were sick. But systems hung together. A siren sounded. People stepped to posts. Tugs moved. Lanes thickened. Clinics set cots. The bell in the circle rang once, and then again when the work was done. Far below, the island of Jaya kept its forests. A post on its shore recorded the days when the bell's note hung in the wind from above. Once a year, a clerk there wrote that the sky had spoken. He noted the hour and the wind. He closed his book. A line from a sky city met a line from a sea town without a ship between them. The bell is not an ending. It is a working tool, kept clean, tested, and used often together. At evening in Angel Island, ledgers close. A white beret signs the day watch over tonight. Wind clocks tick on a post. A clerk puts chalk back in a box and wipes the board. A small bell under the eave rings once. Over the white sea, the big bell keeps its note between reefs and roads. It is not loud. It is enough to mark time in a city that learned, at last, to ring together.